Hello everybody, Darguin Fortuna here from Flow Design Architects. We have a special guest today, an architect that I met by a serendipity, I guess, right, with the SFX group connecting there. And we hit it off right away. So Jeremiah Russell, tell us a little bit about you, what you do.
Sure.
Everything.
Yeah, my name is Jeremiah Russell, and I'm principal architect of Rogue Architecture, based out of Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm also the head contractor for Rogue Construction, and I also own a development company as well called Rogue Community Development, where we work to design and build multifamily affordable housing projects in all the states that I'm licensed in.
You have a handful.
We've got a few things going on, yeah, one or two.
I was wondering where the name Rogue came from.
So when I first got licensed and started my own firm, it was just Jeremiah Russell, architect.
Yeah.
And
which is very typical. People use their names.
Right. Yeah. I know it. You know, I've got a ton of friends all over the country that's the name of their firm. Is just their name, architect.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew I wanted a name that was not mine, because the work that we do, it's not about me. It's not about my ego or my pride. It's about the client, making sure that they're being served and making sure that we're creating something that that not only are they going to be happy with, but adds something to the quality of the neighborhoods that we design and build in as well. But I also didn't want to keep doing the same things that architecture firms were doing, have been doing since the Egyptians, which is, you get a client, you hire staff, you have to get an office, you have to hire more staff, you have to get a bigger office. It's sort of this monster that has to keep being fed. And so when I was thinking about that, sort of not wanting to keep doing the same thing that everybody else has been doing, but do something different, so that we could serve our clients more flexibly and more efficiently as well. And that's kind of when I stumbled onto Rogue. And if you look up the definition, if you sort of skip the first definition, which is a little disparaging, and go to the second one, it simply means someone who does not conform, someone who does not fit a mold, and thinks and works and operates outside of the box. And so that's what I like to think that we do, is we don't ever want to be happy with just the way we've always done things. We always want to improve, we always want to move further, and ultimately help more people through architecture, through good design.
So I can see, we hit it off ever since we met.
Yeah.
And the definitions that you just mentioned they just ring true to me the same way, right? Flow is the same idea. We don't want to just be within this mold of what the profession already had been forever, right? So we want it to be fluid and flexible, right? And that's another reason why we never named it Darguin Fortuna or Marco Severino, because one, I don't think of myself so highly to have my name on brands, right? Like, I want to be humble on that end, right? And then living to that standard of it's my name, it's my ego, it's my project. In fact, whenever I hear somebody using those terms about a project, my name, my color, my design, that actually gives me a little bit of anxiety, because I think that there is a landscape that's bigger than me. Mm-hmm. There's a world that's bigger than me.
Yeah.
And it's what's my contribution as part of a team.
Sure.
To the world, right?
Yep.
So that's exactly the reason for Flow, exactly the reason why it's not my name or Marcos's name, exactly the reason why we're fluid, right? It's all about the client and the environment and the world and what we think is best as a team. So oftentimes I don't even know who the owners of the projects really are. Like I'm the architect because the title of the architect's there.
Right.
But sometimes I'm
it's
like, well, the framer told me about X. The plumber said something about X. Mm-hmm. The client said this,
sure.
Her grandmother said this,
yeah.
And all of it was synthesized
sure.
in a project that is this project, but I only put this.
Yeah, all synthesized through the process of design, which is hopefully more times than not a collaborative effort.
Exactly. So that's how it all came together. But why architecture? Going back, right? Let's go back in there.
Oh man, that was there was never a plan B. I'll just simply put it that way. I've wanted to be an architect ever since I was a little kid. First trip I ever took to a city, my mother and my grandmother spent most of the day yelling at me because I was in the cab with the window rolled down,
Yeah.
and my head sticking out, looking up at all the buildings.
Oh.
And so, as a kid, I was just fascinated by these great edifices that are in our cities, and how were they built? Who built them? And it's only gotten more of an obsession as I've gotten older. So yeah, there was pretty much architecture. That
Yeah. On that one, we don't necessarily agree. The journey, mine was serendipity completely, right? So we were actually chatting about it. It was trying to decide what to do after graduation from high school, getting all together and figuring out what the path may be. Yeah. And I'm like a little bit like, monkey sees, monkey does. So one of my friends was like, I'm gonna go to architecture, and I was frightened by the next step from high school, which is everything you've ever known.
Sure.
And then something completely new. So I piggybacked. I said, I'm gonna do whatever you're doing, and we're gonna try to stick together, and we're going to the same city, so we might as well create a pack and get together. Then the guy bails out and says, no, I'm homesick. I'm going back home, and I'm going to change careers, I'm going to change schools. And I'm like, I'm already in the middle of this.
Yeah.
And one thing I have is I just don't give up. So when there is a challenge, I just keep on going. So we were actually recently talking about words that might define you. And at the office, we were talking about, Marcos is all about consistency, my business partner. And I was looking at it, and it's like, well, consistency. And the word persistent came on me. And it's like, it's not even about consistency of repeating the same thing. It's just saying, I will not give up.
Yeah.
Right? Like, 'cause repeating the same thing is just a habit. But saying I will not give up is, I don't care that I have to do things differently tomorrow to achieve the goal. Yep. But I will continue to consistently persist.
We're gonna get there.
Exactly. Yep. So that's how, and that's how I stumbled upon architecture, stay there, got an F on my first design class. I didn't have any of the archi-speak. Right? Like, I didn't know,
didn't know what the words were.
Humble Dominican from La Vega, from the north. They didn't know anything about any of this. And then took the challenge as an opportunity, which has been the story of my life. And that's how it's happened, So how do you get into SFX? Because that's where we connected.
Yeah, so that was, you talk about serendipity, it was completely by accident.
Yeah.
I had just stepped down from a local board, the Historic District Commission in Little Rock, because I was termed out, and I was the architect representative for that board for like 7.5 years, and so they finally found somebody to replace me, and so I stepped down from that, and I had just joined another historic nonprofit board, the Quapaw Quarter Association, and I got an email from AIA saying they were looking for small firm board members. Would you like to submit an application? I was like, why not? Yeah. I'm on my lunch break. I got nothing better to do. There's no way they're ever going to pick me. I was like, this is just not even going to happen. So, but it'll be a good exercise. Might as well submit my application. And then I had almost forgot about it, and then I guess it was a little over a month or two later, I get an email basically saying, hey, you've been selected to join the board. Can you click this link and follow these steps? And then I don't remember what it was. Like, I forgot to click the link or whatever, and so then Kathleen sends me another email. She's like, hey, I just wanted to make sure you received this. I was like, oh, I guess I actually did get it. That wasn't like spam.
Yeah.
From the AIA. And so I was like, oh, well, cool. Yeah. I mean, hey, advocating for small firms. I mean, I am a small firm. Why should the big boys have all the fun? So
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So same idea. I got the invite, right? Applied, and I didn't know whether it was like something you throw into the atmosphere and you don't know what's gonna happen.
Absolutely.
And got selected. But I think it's been a great journey so far, right? We've been learning so much. It's been a great learning
process, yeah.
Yeah, so much about the AIA, but also the struggles that we have, which shows us that no matter what jurisdiction you're in, we're all in this together, and we're all probably going through the same stuff, Yeah. So similar challenges. Retaining staff members and doing meaningful projects, getting published, some of the
cutting
same.
down on the administrative time that we have to spend, just maintaining and running a business.
And staying creative and sharp 24/7,
Yeah.
which is really, really difficult. Which brings me to a point. In your opinion, what's like the next challenge of architecture for architects right now? What's the challenge you see?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for architects coming up quickly is one that we've been ignoring for a really long time, and that's pure sustainability. I mean, we've known for decades that we can't just keep sort of keeping this engine churning down the road. At some point, we have to change directions. I think, technology is getting to a point where it's allowing architects and contractors to be more, be more efficient with the building process, but also just to make buildings more efficient. You think of just like a simple one is smart home technology. Having systems in place that know, or that you can program when a building is empty, so it can turn up the AC, it can turn off the lights. The building itself can use less energy without a lot of human interaction. I think the next step to that is creating buildings that are more self-sustaining. We have to get out of this mode of only building for 5, 10, or maybe even 20 years. We have to get back to building for a 100-year life cycle. So anything that we put up, it's there and it stays in use at least for 100 years. And it can have multiple uses. It can, we're currently living in a historic town where none of the buildings that are around us right now probably have either the same tenant or the same type of tenant them that they originally did.
There's a lot of adaptive reuse going on right now.
So adaptive reuse is really big. Obviously, the most sustainable building is the one that already exists.
That's right.
Which is why we do a lot of historic preservation. But yeah, I think that's the biggest change. It's unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen from a policy perspective. I think it's going to have to happen with private businesses like us, architects, contractors, educating clients and developers to say, no, we need to do this, A, because it's the right thing to do, but B, it's cost effective.
Yeah.
And this is why. We have to be the educator in that scenario.
So we have a similar approach here, Flo, when it comes to what we see as a challenge, and sustainability is one of them. But the way we see it is more, we try to aim at a macro perspective on how buildings are put together, but in general, who puts them together, where do they come from, in general, as an ecosystem. So that's the way I would see it. So we look at it as a biodiversity type of situation, right? So it's like, well, architecture suffers from the fact that we don't have a lot of Latinos architects, we don't have a lot of women architects, we don't have a lot of African American architects. So it means that the ones that are building the world we live in aren't necessarily representative to the population that lives in the world we're in. So Flow Design has been focusing on increasing diversity in the field of architecture by going to preschools, which is when the decision of becoming an architect begins. You had it ever since you could remember. Going to middle schools and high schools, college and post-college, to train that team, to engage them in different ways, right? So the hook for somebody that's in high school probably might be money. The hook from somebody that's probably in middle school is, this is fun, right? So, and the hook for somebody that's graduating college that went through architecture is, why get licensed at all?
Yeah.
So it's like, why start anything and not finish it at all, right?
Yep.
So we keep hooking them up and going through all of that. And what we believe is that then the buildings that we're going to generate will represent all of us, but also will represent innovative solutions that we haven't thought of because they haven't affected us directly. So somebody from, let's say, Colombia is suffering from something different than somebody that's, let's say, in Miami. But Miami may suffer something similar at some point, and the solution might come from a designer from an architect from Colombia, right? An African American will look at, how to make a different neighborhood, looking at their experience. And from within, right? So from what they are. So the moment that we have different people within the industry, and not only in the architectural part, that's the one I'm trying to touch, Flo is trying to touch, but who is the builder, right? It's the same idea. How many women builders do we have? How many African Americans builders do we have? How many Latino builders do we have? How many Indian builders do we have? So if we look at it as a whole ecosystem from beginning to end, we're changing the product, which is more sustainable, more highly representative and adaptive buildings that deal with problems that might not affect us today, but will affect us in the future and might have affected us before, and we didn't know why we walked away from that in the first place. Like vernacular, right? Vernacular is something that most architects agree on the fact that that was rooted on a reality that today has been completely forgotten.
Yes, so architects and builders used to build for a place. That's where we get vernacular architecture from. It's a specific solution to a specific place. Yeah. But I think talking about, thinking of architecture and construction as a biodiverse ecosystem, yes. the more cultural representation that we have, the more those vernacular and cultural construction norms can be brought in and maybe adapted to a new use. Yeah. I mean, maybe there is maybe there's a place for Adobe type construction in Massachusetts.
Exactly.
Maybe it's not just for the Southwest and and South America. Maybe there is something to be said of flexible mud bricks from Turkey and use those in California, where there's a lot of seismic. And their solution seems to be lots of steel.
Exactly. So, of course, this is a topic that we could go on and on and on and on, right? So we are tackling similar problems in different ways, right? So that diversity, biodiversity, who makes the buildings, all of that. That's the contribution Flo could see because of who we are, right? Like I'm from another place, and I'm from another country, and the things that the more I think about it, the more I think about problems that I see. Right? It may be something as horrible as what happened in Texas with the schools, right? The more I think about things like that, and the more I see that the obvious solution is to ask the questions to people that don't even have the problem and why. Countries like the Dominican Republic has never ever had a shooting in the entire country in a school. And we have to be humble and nimble about that, because that's one problem that I think the United States has as a ego sort of power, right? And I'm a United States citizen, so there's different participants within that. But the problem is that we're not humble enough to say India had it right, China had it right, Mexico had it right, the Dominican Republic has had it right. They've never had any major shooting. What are they doing in the schools that we aren't doing? And if the moment you start opening it up, the pool, to a bunch of other individuals who are all affected, because this country is the most diverse I can ever think of any other diverse country. Sure. It was founded on diversity. It was created on that base. So that's how I see that we can start tackling a bunch of problems using that diversity. And one thing I always say is that if you are not at the dinner table, you are the menu. And sadly, because we don't have enough participation across the board.
Not enough people at the table.
We wouldn't be able to ever hear the solutions. They're creative solutions, right? And from that perspective, it pays off as a business too, because I get all these creative answers at the office and all of this creative architecture that I can't. Darguin Fortuna architect would just never be able to come up with that. So it makes sense. It's not just the thing we're giving to the generations to come, it's the thing that also sustains us as we go. Sure. And that's a business proposition that most people, I would actually argue a lot of architects need to start thinking on the mindset. It's like, well, wait a minute. And it doesn't mean hiring that diversity. It's probably even outsourcing within that diversity. It's probably collaborating like we are within that diversity.
Well, one of the things that I think you're doing really well is, and that's going to have a huge impact on ensuring that the future of architecture is more inclusive, equitable, and diverse, and that is going into schools. That is really something, architects, we are, not to put too fine a point on it, but we are public servants. We are serving the public good.
That's right.
And we should be spending more time in schools, talking to kids, not just our own kids' schools, but inner city schools and And wherever we can find an opportunity to work with kids and teach them about architecture and how architecture is building community.
All right, so we're running out of time. We
Yep.
can go on, but how can people find you? Anybody that was watching these wants to
Yep.
know about Jeremiah Russell.
Just go to www.roguearch.com, roguearch.com.
Instagram too?
Oh yeah, Instagram, I mean really just Google Rogue Architect and you're gonna find a picture of me somewhere.
Excellent, excellent. So my pleasure. We're gonna be changing the world together, and we're gonna keep
brother.
doing a lot of work together. Coming soon, we're gonna be doing something for a lot of architects who don't have a social media presence. That's probably killing a lot of them, right? Not having a social media
Yeah.
presence, not having a strong presence at all, right? That's a problem. So we're gonna be doing a lot of work together, collaborating, doing talks about how to get that presence. In fact, this is part of that, all right? So thank you, stay tuned, and we'll continue to do more.
Thanks, Darwin.
Okay, perfect.